Hey you guys, it's Peter and welcome to my channel, Peter Likes Books. And today I want to do a review of my favorite book so far in 2025, which was probably my least anticipated book of 2024. Probably the book that I thought that I would never finish. Probably the book that I thought I would never get through. Probably the book that I never thought I would give more than 2 or 3 stars to, but I was hopeful. And that is The Comfort of Crows by Margaret Renkel. I love this book so much. I can't even begin to tell you how profoundly this book changed my life. So let me get into kind of the history of how I found out about this book. So I am an avid follower of Reese Witherspoon's Reese's Book Club. Just bought her most recent book, Broken Country, for March. And so every month I go over and I look to see what her book of the month is. I believe that this was the September book for Reese's Book Club. So I saw it come up, and I saw that she posted this picture with the author. I think Margaret Renkel's picture is right back here. There's Margaret Renkel. And she posted a picture with her and talked about how she had been her school teacher when she was growing up. And I was kind of inspired by that story alone. Reese Witherspoon, somebody that I've loved watching for a long time, ever since Man in the Moon back in the day, which I watched in my movie club last year. And so I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to order this book. I read about the book. I read the synopsis. And so I was like, I think I'm going to order this book, and maybe I'll try to read the physical copy of the book. At that time, I was only listening to audio versions of books. And I was like, I think I'm going to try this. I thought the cover was beautiful. I thought if I don't like it, my neighbor across the street's a gardener. I knew it had a lot to do with gardening. I thought this is such a weird book for Reese Witherspoon to pick, but it's her teacher, so, I like this. So I got the book. The book came. First of all, can we just talk about the cover of this book? The book is absolutely beautiful. So the book is The Comfort of Crows, A Backyard Year by Margaret Renkel, okay? And I'm going to read you the synopsis of it really quickly. Well, first of all, let's read about Margaret Renkel, because you need to understand who the author is to really appreciate the book. Margaret Renkel, and it's R-E-N-K-L, because I keep on talking about it. I've talked about this so many times. I've talked about it in my vlog. I've talked about it in my drama videos. I've talked about it literally on every channel that I have, and I have 7 channels. It's so profoundly affected my life. Margaret Renkel is the author of Late Migrations, A Natural History of Love and Loss in Graceland, At Last, Notes on Hope and Heartache from the American South. She's a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times, where her essays appear weekly, the founding editor of Chapter 16, a daily literary publication of Humanities Tennessee, and a graduate of Auburn University and the University of South Carolina. She lives in Nashville. And then the artistry in the book, and there is, some of the most beautiful art that you have ever seen in your entire life. It's just it's like every 3rd chapter, there's a beautiful piece of artwork that I would love to have some of it framed. Billy Renkel is an artist whose work has been featured in many solo and group exhibitions and the illustrator of books, including Late Migrations. He lives in Clarksville, Tennessee, where he teaches at Austin Prey State University. So this is the synopsis of the book. A luminous book that traces the passing of seasons, personal and natural. In The Comfort of Crows, Margaret Renkel presents a literary devotional, 52 chapters that follow the creatures and plants in her backyard over the course of a year. As we move through the seasons, from a crow spied on New Year's Day, its resourcefulness and sense of community, setting a theme for the year, to the lingering bluebirds of December, revisiting the nest box they used in spring, what develops is a portrait of joy and grief. Joy in the ongoing pleasures of the natural world, and grief over winters that end too soon, and songbirds that grow fewer and fewer. Along the way, we also glimpse the changing rhythms of human life. Grown children unexpectedly home during the pandemic, prepare to depart once more. Birdsong and night-blooming flowers evoke generations past. The city and the country where Renkel raised her family transform a little more with each passing day. And the natural world, now is invisible flux, requires every ounce of hope and commitment from the author and from us. For as Renkel writes, radiant things are bursting forth in the darkest places, in the smallest nooks, and deepest cracks in the hidden world. With 52 original color artworks by the author's brother, Billy Renkel, The Comfort of Crows is a lovely and deeply moving book from a cherished observer of the natural world. So the book starts in winter, okay, and it goes to the end of fall. And so there are 13 weeks of each season that it goes through. So when I started reading this, which is a table of contents at the beginning, when I started reading this, The first chapters, like, let me just give you an idea, okay, when you start reading this. First of all, it's so poetically sound. I was not sold on this book, and I restarted this book like 3 times, because when you start it, okay, it goes into this whole thing. Where's the beginning, the preface to it? She goes into this whole thing about, stop and look at the tangled rootlets of the poison ivy vine climbing the locust tree. And then she goes, stop and consider the deep hollows of the persimmon's bark. I was just like, girl, I can't do this. I cannot do this. She talks about water underneath the trees in the deep of winter, and like how they're, and I was like, I can't. Like, I'm sorry. I like did this when I was getting my bachelor's degree in English. I'm trying so hard. I cannot do this. You know, stop and think about it. I mean, she goes on and, the world lies before you, a lavish garden. I just was like, I cannot do this. And so I tried over and over and over again to start this book. Well, in December, I read these advent calendar thriller mysteries, and they got me back into reading physical copy books every single day, and they really relaxed my mind. Okay, that's part of the story. So I believe that it was February, and I was like, I think I started it in January, but in February I started making a commitment that I was no, it was in February, that I was going to read a couple of chapters of this every single day. I think it was like, if I read 3 chapters, they're not chapters, they're just entries, stories, essays, and each of them is about anywhere from like a page to 3 pages. And so I was like, I'm going to read a couple of these every single day, and then by the end of the month, I'll finish the book. I don't know the transformative quality that this book has in it. All I know is that my goals in 2025 are to live in the present moment while also honoring the past, to focus that while I'm in the moment, am I living my best life? And that could look like, if I'm having a fountain pop with my best friend, talking to my best friend, in that moment, am I living my best life? Like, is there anything? Yes, in that moment, I'm living my best life. To appreciate the moment, and to not borrow time and to not borrow trouble. These are a lot of my goals going into 25. And to just slow down a little bit, because life is so fast. This book achieved this for me. I would read this book at night, and my mind would just slow down. It was slow. It was so slow. This book brought me calm. It brought me peace. I don't even know what it was. I have not shut up about this book since I got to about chapter 4 in it, or about the 4th episode, because what happens is, it's a lot about her talking about gardening, but it's not a gardening book like you think. Like, she believes very much in like messy gardens and not raking up the leaves, and it's a lot about the natural. She's more of a naturalist, more of like the natural wildlife but she lives in suburbs, and that live in the suburbs, and so it made me start sitting in quiet and noticing the squirrels outside, or the way that the tree was bending. My mind slowed down. It made me look at things in a different way. But what she does through the book is that she uses the lens of nature to compare it or be a perspective for her own life, to raising children, to going through grief, to growing older, to everything that she's gone through in her life. She's used nature as a lens. And I don't know why, but for some reason, it made a lot of sense to me. And it slowed me down in a way that I really, really needed. Now, I have told some friends of mine this. I'm 52, I'll be 53. I don't know that maybe, I don't know. I have no clue. But I almost kind of feel like if I had read this when I was 30, I don't know that it would have hit the same way. I think that having gone through loss, gone through trauma, going through difficult times, breakups, losing my mother, things like that, I think this book hit differently than it would have hit at 30. Do I think that you could read it at 30 and get a lot out of it? Absolutely. I almost, to be honest with you, wish I'd read it at 20, 30, 40, 50, again, because I think it would have hit me differently at different ages, but I think it also would have given me a perspective that I didn't have at those ages that this book has given me. So I just want to tell you before I get into it, to show you how profound this book hit me. When I got done, I bought several books she talks about Ann Patchett in here. So I bought a lot of the books that she talks about in here. She references a lot of books. I ended up buying the books. And so she talks about Ann Patchett, the author. And so I bought one of Ann Patchett's books of essays. And I was going to read that for the book of March, because going into every month, I'm trying to pick, 4 or 5 books that I'm reading a little bit of every night. And I was standing there in the kitchen, and I had bought I also have, somebody just sent me a copy of it, and I also bought a copy. So the one that I was sent, I'm going to keep, and the one that I bought, I'm going to give to my friend Tanya Jean. And so I also have the Leaf, Cloud, and Crow, a weekly backyard journal. It's a journal that you can do your own 52 weeks of yourself, and it gives you writing prompts, and it has parts of the book in here as well. So Tanya and I are going to both start this summer, which I'm really excited about. And then I also bought Late Migrations. I bought all of her essay books. I brought all of her books of essays I bought. And so I'm currently reading Late Migrations right now. And Late Migrations talks about, in brief essays, Reese traces, Reese. I think Reese Witherspoon just came out with a book, didn't she? In brief essays, Margaret Wrinkle traces a tender and honest portrait of her unforgettable parents and the bittersweet moments that accompany a child's transition to caregiver. I'm not going to get into this whole thing, but it says, braided into the overall narrative, she also offers observations on the world surrounding her suburban Nashville home. And so this book is very much, you can tell it was written before Comfort of Crows, although she did say, if you read the author's note in this, which you should if you read the book, because it's fantastic. She talks about how she actually wrote this over several years, not just 1 year. It's very similar to this, although this is a book that is talking about her parents, her grandparents, her great-grandparents even, and her growing older, all done in a very similar way that this does, through the view of nature. So like one essay will be about a bluebird's eggs and a wren that's trying to steal these bluebird eggs, and she'll compare it to like having children of her own and what that was like, and that's what she does, and it's fantastic. There is a chapter in the Comfort. So the reason I chose to read this month was I was like, this brought so much peace and serenity to you in February. Why not just continue it? And so I continue with Late Migrations, and I'm loving it. I mean, it just feels like a continuation. It feels like a little bit like older than this, but it feels like a continuation of what I was already reading. It has not let me down. I'm loving this. One of the chapters in here she's talking about, and this was written several years ago, but she's talking about how she's leaving work one day as a school teacher, and she's coming home, and she's got like listening to the news, just a lot going on in the world that day. She doesn't really say what it is. She never really says that kind of stuff. But instead, she stops by this park. Now, for those of you that watch my other channels, I used to go to this park called Ritchie Woods, and I would walk around there and I would film videos. And it kind of reminded me of that a little bit. Because she said even at the deepest part of the woods, you can still hear the cars going by. And so she's sitting in there, and this part was so poignant to me. And whatever day I read that on was the day that I needed to hear it. Because she said in there, because one of the things I'm really choosing in 2025 is where I put my energy. And do I put it into, panic, fear, worry, anger, resentment, or where do I put it? And so she stops in the woods, and she's looking around, and her head is filled with all this kind of stuff. And instead of going home, she goes to this park. And she's walking around, and she's like, she says in there, we should be concerned about world events. We should be concerned with what's going on in the world around us, and we should. But maybe once in a while, we should take a moment to notice nature. Because nature, birds building nests, birds flying here, a violet plant growing from a tree, does not stop because of what is said on social media, or what somebody tweets out, or a Facebook post, or what's going on in the world. They do not stop. Nature goes on. It continues to go on. It'll go on long after we're here. And it was such a poignant moment for me, and it just really affected me that day, and I needed to hear it. I want to read just this part to you that I love so much. And this day, I can't even read this part. I gotta find it. It's about grief. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can find it. I should have had it all set up. I just read it to my husband the other night again, because I went back to look at it. And she has these little praise songs in there in between too that I love so much. The Grief of Lost Time, 127. Okay, so I read this to so many people. I read this to my best friends, my other friends, Alex, my sponsor, my therapist. I read this to so many people. So the chapter is called The Grief of Lost Time. It's spring, and it's week 13. So it's the last week of spring going into summer. And she goes home. She calls it Lower Alabama. She grew up in Lower Alabama. And she is talking about how she's going home because one of her girlhood friends' father has passed away. So she's going home for the funeral, but it's also her nephew's high school graduation. And so she's going for his graduation as well, and she's staying with her sister. And so while she's there, she visits like the old neighborhood that she grew up in, and she's looking at the neighbors' houses and things like that. And throughout the book, she talks about how they used to play in the cemetery. And they would run around these cemetery stones and they weren't afraid of it and things like that. And so in here she says, she's talking about how she had avoided streets that they used to live on in their last house. And where's the part where she says she is looking at the houses and she says, this tree, and she says, I stood and listened to those trembling leaves for longer than anyone watching from inside would have understand. Time means something different to me now than it did when I was a girl sharing a bed with my baby sister in our room in the corner of the house. Then she talks about going to the funeral and all this kind of stuff. And she talks about all these notes she has all over her house, which I so related to this. And she said, instantly I was thinking about those Post-it notes stuck all over my house. How had I allowed myself to become so busy? How long had it been since I'd spent a day in the sun eating sandwiches? I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm going to start bawling when I get to this one part. How had I allowed myself to become so busy? How long had it been since I'd spent a day in the sun eating sandwiches from a cooler and watching water ripple across the surface of a lake? Why do I so often behave as though there will be unlimited days to sit quietly with my own beloveds listening to birdsong and wind in the pines? A child who grew up playing in graveyards ought to grow up understanding the reach of mortality. The way it is always hurtling toward us faster than spring turns into summer on a southbound highway. Faster than a sapling becomes a shade tree and a house becomes someone else's home. And yet I conduct faster than a newborn baby becomes a man. And yet, here it is. And yet, I conduct my life as though I have all the time in the world, filling my hours in ways I can't always account for when evening falls. And then she goes on to describe this plant that her mom brought from Alabama when she moved into this rental home across the street from her, and how every spring and every summer she brings it back in even though her mom has passed away. She takes it in the fall, and in the spring she brings it back out. Driving back from Alabama, I kept thinking about that potted holly fern, about the way my mother had pulled it from the soil of the house where I spent my last years at home, about how I carry it inside every fall and outside every spring, year after year, without thinking. As though the years are nothing. As though springtime will always be waiting for me, dappling everything with light. This book was so profound to me on such a level. I mean, I read this part that says, and yet I conduct my life as though I have all the time in the world, filling my hours in ways I can't always account for when evening falls. We live our lives like we have unlimited time, and we don't, you know? And this book was such a great reminder of it. It slowed me down. I thought that I would maybe, go back and read, one chapter, one every week when it starts in real time, but it's so fantastic as a quick read, and it just really, really helped me out in a way that I needed. So I wanted to share that with you guys. For me, it was a 5 out of 5, but I think that goes without saying. It was so beautifully written. There were so many passages in here that I couldn't, wait to run to the phone and tell somebody about. And I'm sure she's not watching this, but to Margaret Wrinkle, thank you for this. I needed this. Anyway, let me know if you've read this. Put what you think about it in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.